Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to another recorded episode of the Guys Who Stare at Stats. Usually we try to do these things live, but this is kind of a hectic week, spring break week for most of us. But more importantly, it is March Madness week, so no Connor or Andrew today, but I do have my good friend, a great friend even.
Oh, a great friend.
Tyler Riggs here with me. Tyler, it's been a while since you've been on the show, but what better time to come back than for March Madness?
Yeah, I mean, we finished our March Madness with the high school stuff last couple weeks, so got some free time, probably too much free time on my hands now to analyze all this. And I'm excited, man. It's the best time of the year, Cade. Nothing beats waking up on Thursday knowing, oh, there is a full slate of games rolling. You know, if you're a true degenerate, you like the first 4 games too. But yeah. Can't wait to get it going this weekend.
Yeah, I think this will be, unfortunately, Tuesday will be the first time I think I missed the first 4. I'll be up in Wichita watching OU baseball, taking on Wichita State.
Okay.
And when I get $8 tickets that I can find,
There you go.
that's something I got to do. So it'll be the first time I think I'm missing the first 4 ever that I could think of. But we're going to start here. This will be kind of a segmented video series we'll do, breaking down every single bracket. We're going to start with the South bracket here, looking at the ESPN Men's Tournament Challenge. We do have a Tournament Challenge link, folks. If you do want to join it, just search for Fans of the Guys Who Stare at Stats. That's Fans of TGWSS, because you can't type all of it into an ESPN thing. Trust me, I tried last year and this year.
Big on abbreviations.
Yeah,
That's
big
what
on
we do.
abbreviations. That's what we roll with here.
Yeah.
That's what we do. So we got to roll with it. I mean, folks, and speaking of abbreviations, this is a game that can be abbreviated shortly, I would think, Tyler, as we look at our first matchup here. The 116, Alabama taking on either Texas A&M Corpus Christi or Southeast Missouri. The boys from Cape Girardeau, I mean, they had a fun run this year.
Yeah.
They made the tournament. They're the projected winners if you go by ESPN's BPI, the Bracket Predictor Index. Is it going to matter, though, when it comes to playing the Crimson Tide?
It will not. I will say if Texas A&M Corpus Christi doesn't win that game, they should be ashamed. Southeastern Missouri is terrible. I mean, I don't know how they won their bid, but yeah, Bama's got this. It doesn't matter. You know, it doesn't matter who you throw out there in that 16 seed. I don't think there's a 16 seed this year that has any sort of aura to actually upset anybody. Let me put it that way.
I mean, it's one of those. There's definitely no UMBC lurking in the
That's
shadows
right.
this year. And
Can't
even
make them like UMBC.
yeah, even the year they went, I mean, I don't think anyone believed they would do it except for maybe the UMBC Twitter account. That's about all I can think of.
That, and then maybe the head coach, he was probably lying to himself too.
Yeah, I mean, it was still a fun story, though. But as we look at our next game, that brings up Maryland versus West Virginia. And I mean, you look at it here on the screen, the just offenses of these two. West Virginia averages 6 points more per game, also gives up 8 points more per game. And you look at the notable results, these teams have played a lot. These are two teams, Tyler, at least when I look at it, you can look at the little game predictor as well, ESPN giving you a cheat sheet, I guess, if you really want it here. They try to use it to get those ESPN Plus subscribers. Nothing wrong with that. Just
A lot of good
staying
content
on the
ESPN Plus. I
But
stand.
it's funny when you look at it because in most 8-9 games, and you know this as well as I do, Tyler, you want a definition of a coin flip.
Yeah.
I think this is the definition. West Virginia, we both follow the Big 12. We know how they can play. And they're a very, what I like to call Jekyll and Hyde team. You don't know which West Virginia you're going to get. Maryland, a bit more solid overall throughout the year.
They are, and Maryland's more balanced in that sense. That being said, though, I think, Cade, is what we'll see, at least for West Virginia's offense, is what we've seen where they could be explosive enough to creep up on teams. And, look, let's be honest, whoever wins this game is not going to beat Alabama. I don't think you have a 8-9 here that's going to provide a challenge to the 1 seed. There's some down in the bracket we'll talk about later, I think, have a chance. But this is not one of them. I personally have West Virginia here. I think in the end they just find enough offense to get by Maryland. Maryland's not really impressive in anything they do other than just being balanced.
And see, I agree with you here. This is one of those that we'll talk about another game where I feel the exact same way with this situation here. But West Virginia, I think they've been playing better. It's March. You know that Coach Huggins has this team ready to go. And this is a West Virginia team that we've talked about. They're up and down, but I think they come in on the right foot and get the win over Maryland here.
And just to add a quick point, because this is going to be a common theme, at least for me throughout my brackets I've found so far, is folks remember, offense, it seems like for whatever reason in the last, probably 10 years, travels better in the tournament than it seems like great defense does. I think the defense comes in play when you talk about your Elite Eight, your Final Four, those type of matchups. But at least in these first-round games and maybe even round of 32, I mean, we saw with Oral Roberts a couple years ago, right? They were not outstanding defensively, but their offense was lethal enough. It didn't matter. So I think, I will probably slant myself towards the better offensive teams in a lot of cases, but it'll be interesting to see how that plays.
That brings us to a 5-12 game. I don't know if you want to talk about maybe – not going to say the upset pick of the tournament because there are so many good games here, but San Diego State taking on College of Charleston. At College of Charleston, you've probably heard that name if you're a basketball fan this year. They were in the top 25 at one point, a record of 31-3 on the season. And, I mean, that's just incredible to have 30 wins before you even make the tournament.
Yeah, and they still stick you as a 12th seed. They get a rough draw here, and you're right. I think a lot of people look to this as, we know the 12-5s, and it seems like more and more now the 13-4 matchups kind of lend towards that, here's your potential upset specials. And this is a trendy pick for a lot of people. Cade, I'm going the opposite way. I like San Diego State. I think the metrics bear them out to actually be a sneaky good team, at least defensively. They're really solid. And I don't know if College of Charleston has seen that type of defense yet this season and at least have beat it. So I'm going against the trend here. I'm taking the Bourne 5 seed.
Well, here's the thing that I look at it, Tyler. Sometimes there's an upset that's too good to be true.
Right.
You can will that upset into existence, and I saw it last night during the ESPN show, during the CBS show. You had a lot of people that, okay, if Charleston gets a 12, they're a team you probably need to pick. And I think it definitely gets in the head. You don't think San Diego State comes into this game knowing that even though they're the 5 seed, they can have that underdog mentality? This is a classic offense versus defense matchup. And usually when that happens, defense is the thing that wins championships. So I'm going with San Diego State to get this win as well.
Not only that, Cade, but, when it comes down to it, I think the Mountain West is slept on a little bit as a conference this year. They were pretty deep.
That they were. I mean, when you get 4 teams in the tournament, that's always –
non-power.
Yeah, as a non-power, that's a good sign. And that brings up the next one here, Virginia and Furman. This is a fun one here. Virginia just got through an absolute clunker of a game against Duke in the ACC championship. Furman, a senior-led team, the SoCon. You have experience all across the board, one of the best coaches in the mid-majors. This is a Paladin team that they haven't made in forever. It's been over 40 years since they've been here. Furman's fired up to be here.
And everything I just said about San Diego State being the Bourne 5, throw it out the window. I got Furman in this one. Virginia the way they play the game works well in the regular season, but as we have seen, even at their best in the tournament, their style hurts them more than it helps them, it seems like, when they are able to play at such a – I mean, folks, they are the 3rd slowest team in the country in terms of pace. Not in the tournament. In the country, they are 360 out of 363 in possessions. And while defensively, if you're locked in, that's big, right? Because you're choking out the clock. Imagine running a triple option, right? You're choking out the clock. Problem is, in basketball, that keeps a lot of teams in it. And Furman's got enough punch, I think. A name you're going to want to watch out for, folks. Kind of my first name drop of the day.
First name drop.
It is going to be Furman guard Mike Bothwell. 18-point scorer, 3 assists per game, 3 rebounds per game. And as a guard, shoots nearly 52% from the field, one of those big seniors that we talk about. I think it's going to be too much for West Virginia. I think Furman rides the momentum.
Yeah, I mean, for Virginia here, you look at it, and more Paladin facts for you, I guess is the best way to put it. 43 years officially.
Jeez.
And this is a team that 46% of their attempts are from beyond the arc. They're a team that loves to shoot it.
Right.
And I think Virginia can handle it for a while. But when you have that mesh of paces, Virginia slowing it down, Furman speeds it up. If Furman just gets 1 or 2 breaks to go their way, you get a quick run. And, Tyler, I hate to say it, but I think I agree with you here again.
Well,
Furman.
I think it comes
Upset.
down to the fact that Furman plays with confidence, right? I mean, that's a big part of this. When you're one of those mid-major / small school teams, and you could go into a game with confidence, that could sometimes creep up on those those power teams that think, oh, it's first round, we could kind of coast. I mean, we've seen that happen more and more. We see Kentucky and teams like that struggle through it. Doesn't always get them, but sometimes it gives us a scare. And like we talked about with Virginia, for whatever reason, they are seemingly the point of attack for a lot of teams in that sense, I guess. Best way to say it.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things you look at, and that brings us to our 6-11 game here, Creighton and NC State. Now, this is one of those that these are two teams that, kind of pop up on the radar from time to time. Creighton, beginning of the year, preseason top 10, everyone was talking about how this is a Creighton team to watch. They go out to Maui, they pretty much fall off the face of the earth after that, and the Blue Jays just quietly sneaking around. NC State, a bit of the opposite. No one was talking about them back in November, December, January, and all of a sudden, here come the Wolfpack. Both of these teams really trending up here late.
Yeah, and it'll make for an interesting matchup. And we look at it on paper, the records, some of those things, your points per game and whatnot. You're going to say, wait, these teams are, decently similar. Maybe NC State's got a chance here. I don't believe that's the case. I think Creighton's just got more talent. I think that's what it comes down to. Some of these matchups in the first round especially, you'll see a school like we talked about, maybe they're trending up and they're feeling good about themselves. But at the end of the day, talent shows itself in the tournament. I mean, how many teams have we seen be led by their big stars? I mean, that carries well. So I think that's what the Blue Jays have. That's the advantage they'll have here. And quite honestly, they're probably just a little bit better coached team. That being said, though, they are an inconsistent enough team. Wouldn't surprise you if they lose. I just don't think NC State's the team that's going to beat them.
Yeah, in a battle of inconsistent consistencies, I guess is the best way to put it. I like Creighton at the beginning of the year. They let me down a little bit, but they're coming back now. I got to go with Creighton over NC State. I love both these teams. They're both fun programs to keep an eye on.
Good fan bases.
But, these are two teams that I would not be surprised if they travel well at – I mean, they're going to travel well. I don't even need to be surprised about it, but I have Creighton over NC State here. And that brings us to our next one. Baylor taking on UC Santa Barbara. The Gauchos in as a 14 seed. Baylor's a 3, and this is one of those. I already saw someone last night trying to throw the hot. I can't remember who it was on ESPN saying like, "Hey, look out for UC Santa Barbara." So people kind of trying to throw that magic there with the Gauchos.
Well, and here's the thing with that: UC Santa Barbara, you gotta give them credit. The last few years, especially, they've come on and been a very consistent team in terms of they'll churn out 21 seasons. They'll be in competition for their conference, and they play a style that I think is very fun. Like if you catch them late night in a season, like they're one of those teams you might catch them randomly a couple of times. You watch them say, hey, this team's not bad, I think they got a raw deal seeding here. I think that's the issue. If they were a 14 seed in a different matchup or if they were a 13 seed, I give more of a shot. I think Baylor this year has enough offense to deal with UC Santa Barbara. I think that's the issue. Defensively, Baylor can be had. All right, that's how I'll look at it. But I think Baylor in the end, you go through that gauntlet of the Big 12. Not surprisingly, I'm a little biased towards the Big 12 this year in the tournament. I think Baylor's got it.
Yeah, this is one that, I love watching UC Santa Barbara. Any of those Big West schools are always fun to stay up late and watch those games, but I think Baylor takes it here comfortably at the end. That brings us to Missouri and Utah State, the 7-10 game, and this is another back-and-forth one. Missouri, it's hard to think just night and day from where they were last year to now. They've pretty much 2020 you make the tournament, you have the big dip in 21, and now you are back again as a 7 seed. But Utah State, we already talked about it with San Diego State, the Mountain West, a force to be reckoned with this year. The Aggies trying to make some noise.
And you know what? I'm rolling with that momentum. Give me the Aggies, baby. Hey, congrats to Missouri for, like you said, the turnaround essentially a little bit. That's tough to do in a conference like the SEC to try to build something up when you're kind of on a low level. But Utah State, I think, is more ballot-tested. A lot of the Mountain West teams, I think, are more ballot-tested than people realize. And I think that's the issue here. I think it'll be a good game. I don't think it'll be a blowout. But I think in the end, Utah State shows some of that senior leadership. A lot of these teams, a common theme you'll find, because of the portal, there's a lot more seniors kind of dispersed on these smaller school teams, and I think that matters once we get to the tournament.
And to me, Tyler, one of the things to look for in this game, Spending some time watching these two, it's kind of funny when you look at it, especially in the stats prove this as well. Missouri and Utah State have the same weakness when it comes to it, a weakness on weakness, so to speak. Utah State has some trouble with offensive rebounds. Missouri has trouble with defensive rebounds. They're both bottom 50% in those categories. And, I mean, that's the main week on week there. Utah State a bit better shooting-wise than Missouri, and I like Utah State as well in this one. So,
and here's the sneaky part. Utah State 18th in the KenPom rankings, folks.
Yeah.
You start looking through the KenPom, guess who's 14th? San Diego State.
There you go.
There's some of those teams that just creep up and you say, man, I didn't even realize that they were ranked that.
And that brings us to our final matchup of the first round, but being the South bracket breakdown, we'll go through everything here on our way to the Final Four. And Arizona and Princeton, the final matchup to look at. And for the Tigers, congratulations, Ivy League champions. That's about really all we could say here. Arizona's going to win this game.
That's pretty simple.
And then that brings us to the second round matchups here. First one looking at it, Alabama taking on West Virginia. I think we both agreed that Alabama should win this game, but West Virginia, if they keep that hot streak going, they could make this a challenge for the Crimson Tide.
And here's where I want to bring up this caveat because it becomes more and more of an issue, I think, as the tournament goes on, the more Bama advances. All the baggage off the court, I think at some point catches up to Alabama in this tournament because the media noise continues to grow, right? Yeah, they'll win, and Bama fans will be happy, but the media will continue to talk about how things were handled with that off-the-court stuff, especially down the stretch of the season. And I think that noise, I mean, for those college kids, that's tough to ignore, man. I mean, Cade, I've been a college kid. You're a college kid now. Like, you find yourself when your program or, a team of your program or something like that's being talked about in a negative way, even as a fan, that's tough to shut out. And I've been around, and you have as well, when you've been around the team itself that maybe is getting talked about that negative way. Those guys know that's happening,
They
especially
do, yeah.
in today's day and age of social media. You can't just ignore that.
Yeah.
So I don't think it rears its head here in terms of this matchup like we're talking about. I do think West Virginia maybe gives them a little bit of more of a test, though, kind of gets them to play it honest. I don't know if it's necessarily the easiest one for Bama, but they should at least advance. They could sleepwalk to the Sweet 16 this year, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, Alabama, I got to see them in person this year. I got to see their worst game in person this year, folks, when they played OU. They're still fun to watch. I mean, this is an Alabama team that is absolutely stacked with talent. Brandon Miller, I know we mentioned the off-the-court issues there, but when he's going, there's a reason he's one of the freshmen of the year. There's a reason why.
Phenomenal.
He is phenomenal. This is a great Alabama team. It's just, like you mentioned, we'll see what happens with the Crimson Tide, but we both agree they take care of business and beat West Virginia. That brings us to our next one, San Diego State taking on Furman in the 5-13. And, if Furman, we both agree will pull this off here, this theoretical upset, so to speak, over Virginia, it's kind of a similar situation going up against another pro-defense or defense-heavy team in San Diego State.
The difference, though, I think, in this one is that San Diego State does not play at the absolute just slow pace that Virginia plays at. Don't get me wrong. I mean, they're not super fast, right, in terms of that. But at the same time, I think it's going to be a difference enough. And San Diego's defense, by the way, San Diego State's defense is actually rated better than Virginia's. So Virginia's kind of down defensively this year compared to what they were in previous years. That's why they're only a 4 seed, right? So, yeah, I like San Diego State advanced over Furman. I hate to say it because Furman's fun, but I think the Aztecs find their way into the Sweet 16.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those that I think this will be a fun battle, but at the end of the day, I'm taking Furman to keep on rolling. I personally think the Paladins will keep on going here. I think if they can get through Virginia, obviously, like you mentioned, Tyler, it's a bit of a change going back from that slow style of game into a more normal pace you're used to. But Furman's offense, at the end of the day, a double-digit seed always seems to make it to the Sweet 16. It's happened, I don't know how many years in a row now, and I think Furman's this year's team to do it. They've got the leadership, they've got the coaching, they've got the experience, they have everything they need, in my mind, to be that team this year.
My only point of contingency with Furman is that they do have the offense. We touched on that. Their defense is just middle of the road in the country.
It is.
And I think at some point, whether it's against a team like San Diego State that then they themselves mill more of the road offensively, that's when those defenses start to shine. When you get kind of pedestrian offense against bad defense, it helps those pedestrian offenses. So and there'll be more opportunity. I mean, there's matchups like that all throughout this bracket. That'll be interesting to break down. But, yeah, I mean, I can't blame you, but, I'll disagree for now.
Yeah, we'll disagree. We'll agree to disagree on that one. And then that brings us to the next one, Creighton taking on Baylor. 6-3 here. Baylor, obviously, we talked about, fun offensive team. Their defense a little bit weaker, but kind of the mishmash of last year's team where it was the opposite. Baylor at times had the scoring when they were fully healthy.
Right.
And their defense at times more of a liability, sometimes more of a strength. And Creighton, we already brought them up a little bit, trying to get back on the up and up. The Blue Jays, not a team to sleep on at any point.
And believe it or not, because of that, and, more importantly, Baylor's defense not being where it's been, I'm taking Creighton. I think the Blue Jays get into the Sweet 16 and, punch a ticket there because I think in the end, Baylor's defense proves to be just a bit too much of an issue against a really talented, probably underrated, did to themselves, Creighton team. They, ideally, if they would have realized their potential from that early season run, probably wound up more in the Marquette, Xavier, type of range, maybe UConn where you're a 4 or 3 seed somewhere in there. But, yeah, I think this is just a tough matchup for Baylor as the second round. I don't think they survive it.
I agree. This is one of those that I looked at it, and the more I looked at it, I thought, the Creighton really, to me, is one of those matchups that Baylor does not want to get. I think they can handle some of the, the Alabamas of the world, the San Diego States of the world, but they just had to draw Creighton. And I think if they draw someone else, they can win that battle. But Creighton's a team that they're catching fire here late in the season, and they're not a team you want to play. And that brings us to the 2-10 matchup we both have predicted here, Arizona and Utah State. And Utah State, we already mentioned, out of that tough Mountain West, and Arizona trying to, keep on going. They really haven't had a whole lot of big injury issues, but they've been banged up as well. You get to that UCLA game, and it was just injury after injury, just kind of trying to go through the depth there. I mean, I know they mentioned it. Arizona usually only plays 7 deep, and they're already on their 8th guy 5-10 minutes into the game.
Yeah, and I think that's the one flaw of Arizona. Might be the fatal flaw. We'll see. I don't know. That being said, though, I think this might be the best second-round game, of the entire deal here. I mean, not just in the region, but, overall, this is going to be a heck of a second-round game. Arizona's battle-tested quietly, though. I think they've played some really good competition. They came out on the other side. And while Utah State, as we mentioned, played in a tough conference, I think in the end, even with the depth, Arizona probably just a little bit better, Cade.
That's where I'm at. I think Arizona gets the win there, and so that sets us up with Alabama taking on San Diego State and Creighton and Arizona in your bracket, Tyler, and then in mine, Alabama playing Furman and Creighton playing Arizona. So we'll see. Of course, there's the possibility that, Virginia just wins and we're all wrong here, but we'll have to see there, and that brings us to our Sweet 16 matchups we would have in the South. I'll start with you with Alabama, San Diego State, what you have there, since that's the not shown game on the screen. With Alabama playing San Diego State, what do you have there?
And see, here's where that baggage I talk about, I think, catches up, because I think if San Diego State wins the first couple of games and get into that Sweet 16, they're going to realize all of a sudden, oh, hey, we've got a legit chance to make a good run here because of that tough defense, and I think they get just enough offensively. And I think Alabama starts to maybe crumble a little bit here because this is your first real big test, right, of the tournament, and I don't know how they stand up to it very well considering everything. Again, I think the media always increases if they get to the second weekend. You got a whole week to sit on it. So I'm taking San Diego State, Cade, to upset Bama and get to the Elite Eight.
There we go. There we go. Now, obviously, I have a completely different scenario at this point. I've got Alabama and Furman. I think Furman can keep it close for a half, but eventually Alabama pulls away and makes their way to the Elite Eight.
And yours is probably the smarter route, I'll say. This is a very rough draft for me, so this is probably not going to be my final bracket. This is the mix of the gut plus, crack research and, a couple hours just digging too far into the numbers.
This is the literal Kowalski analysis type of bracket, basically. Yeah. But I don't know. I don't think I've ever had a bracket where I say, yeah, this 13 seed's going, and somebody be like, that's probably the more logical, reasonable bracket. But hey, I'll take it.
Hey, I think
I'll
Furman's
take
legit,
it.
man.
I know.
I do.
I know, and that brings us to the Creighton, Arizona game we both agree on.
Yeah.
And with that one, I mean, what a fun matchup that would be.
It will be, and again, I think similar to their matchup against Utah State, I think Arizona, despite the depth issues, just have a touch more talent. They've been more consistent all season than the Blue Jays have, and that's the one thing that people, for whatever reason, and it happens, right, because you get so many teams you're trying to break down, but none of the experts are really touching on Arizona being a consistent team. I told you off air before this, I feel just about all the 2-seed teams could easily have been 1 seeds, maybe the exception of Houston not being a 2 seed, depending on the health of Sasser. But still, I think Arizona is just a quietly consistent team. And I think at the end, that's what gets it for them against the Blue Jays of Creighton.
And, yeah, I mean, it's one of those that Arizona, to me, they have all the pieces there. They showed in their game against UCLA that was back and forth the entire time. I think Arizona beats Creighton here. I think this is one that Creighton will put up a great fight, but at the end of the day, Arizona, they don't have the depth, but they do have the physicality to win that game.
Well, and sometimes we see with these teams, especially in the tournament, as long as everybody's healthy, of course, that's always a big sticking point. But sometimes it's better if you got 7 really solid guys rather than trying to play 10 deep, and 2 of those might be questionable, right? If you got 7 guys you could trust, sometimes that helps teams more than it hurts, having lack of depth.
And then that would put us in our theoretical Elite Eight game here of you've got San Diego State and Arizona, I believe, and I've got Alabama, Arizona.
Yeah.
So I'll go with you first since, once again, the game not on screen here. But, Tyler, what happens when San Diego State plays Arizona?
This is where, again, I stick to the guns of Arizona, only because this is going to be the team for San Diego State, I believe, that can match them in terms of just on the floor 5 versus 5, right? And overcome that really stingy defense. And so I take Arizona to get to the Final Four, win the region, and move on. And miracle run ends for San Diego State. Gets people buzzing, though. Excited about the Mountain West prospects next year.
There you go. I mean, that sounds like a fun ride with Arizona going there, but I have it as a battle between Alabama and Arizona, the 1 versus 2. Keep it a bit more, I guess, chalk here if you really want to go that way.
Okay.
But I mentioned that Arizona's a physical team, but there's something they don't have at times, and that's athleticism. That's something that Alabama does have.
Yep.
Being able to have those
Definitely.
athletes that can run and do and whatever they need to do, and I think Alabama will have that ability to get to that second gear that Arizona doesn't have in them. I've got Alabama making their way down to Houston for the Final Four.
Very interesting. And here's going to be the real critical part because, I was talking with a former colleague of mine about it throughout today. We were debating on how many 1 seeds are going to make the Final Four. So generally the numbers will tell you that on an average year, you can expect 1 to 2 1 seeds in the Final Four. Rarely does 3 or more get in, 3 to 4, right? And also rarely does none of them get in. So I'm curious to see in a year where everybody believes it's wide open how many of these 1 seeds get in. Sometimes on years like this, Cade, the chalk comes up strong, right? It turns out a lot more boring than we anticipate. But in some of those years, we get utter chaos. I mean, think of Kemba's run with UConn. That was a year where everybody's like, oh, this is wide open. And it just took the hot team to win it. So it'll be interesting to see that.
That it will. Folks, that'll wrap it up for the South bracket breakdown here. We'll have the other 3 brackets and, of course, the Final Four analysis that we believe is going to happen on the way. But if you enjoyed this, feel free to like the video, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and we'll also have that link to join the Fans of the Guys Who Stare at Stats Tournament Challenge. I sincerely appreciate any support. It might be something as simple as just, that one little click that takes 2 or 3 seconds out of your day, but it does mean a lot, and we do appreciate it. So with that all being said, have a good one, everybody, and happy bracket building.